Hello, thank you for joining us today. My name is Ben Wilting, and I work for the Amarillo Public Library. This is part 3 of our 13-part series designed to teach you how to obtain citizenship in the United States. Today, we will be covering questions 12 through 25 of the civics portion of your citizenship test. Today, all of our questions have to do with the legislative branch of U.S. government. Stay tuned. Understanding how the government works is an important part of being a citizen. Today, we will discuss some of the basics of U.S. government as well as its legislative branch. Okay, so let's get started. Today, all our questions have to do with the legislative branch of government as well as a brief overview of how the government works in the United States. If this is the first session that you've joined us for, just to let you know, all the questions that we'll be talking about can be found in the description below. We'll have a link to our Amarillo Public Library website, which will have our list of the 100 questions. Those will be the same list of questions that you find on the USCIS website. The only difference is we have reordered them so that they're in a little more of a logical order. Makes it easier for us to teach them. Okay, so let's get started. Question number 12. Name one branch or part of the United States government. There's several answers. You can say Congress, the legislative branch, the president, executive branch, the courts, or the judicial branch. Those are all accepted answers when you go in for your civics test. Now, as we've talked about before, when it asks for only one, make sure that you only give one answer. Okay? If you're unfamiliar with the United States government and you'd like to just try to find one that's easy to remember, I would suggest president for this question. The president is the answer for several of the other civics questions. So if you learn president for this one, you can just remember that for other civics questions as well. President is a very easy one to remember. Number 13, who is in charge of the executive branch of government? The answer, the president. The president of the United States is the head of the executive branch of government. Number 14, what stops one branch of government from becoming too powerful? The answer, checks and balances and separation of power. Now, in the previous questions, we talked about the judicial, the executive, the legislative branch. So let's go into that in a little more detail. If you look at the picture on this slide, you'll see legislative, executive, and judicial. Underneath that, you'll see Congress, President, and Supreme Court. Underneath there, those are the positions that make up the branches. Okay. These are the 3 pieces of government, and each one has their own role and serves their own purpose in the United States government. So let's talk about the legislative branch real quick. The legislative branch, that's the branch of government that determines what new laws are going to be enacted in our country. So what they do is they get together and they determine what they would like to see become laws, and they write that down in what they call a bill. And once they've agreed amongst themselves whether or not that bill is good enough, once they've determined that it is good enough, they'll send it to the president, the executive branch. The president then has to make a decision on whether or not they want to sign that bill. Once they sign it, it becomes a law. However, if the president doesn't like the bill, they can decide to veto it, which means they will not sign it. They send it back to the legislative branch where it stays a bill. It doesn't become a law. So we can see sort of a dynamic between the president and the legislative branch. The legislative branch can't just make laws. They can propose laws, but the president has to agree on those laws. Now, if the president decides to veto the bill and sends it back to the legislative branch can take another vote. And if they can get a 2/3 majority vote, they can override that veto, bypassing the president. So, in that relationship between the executive and the legislative branch, neither one has absolute power over the other. They share the power to make new laws. The judicial branch is in charge of interpreting the laws that are made by the legislative branch and then enacted by the executive branch. They get to determine exactly how we follow those laws. They get to interpret how those laws are going to work in society. And they also get to see if those laws conflict with our constitutional rights. And if so, they can throw the law out. So we see each piece of this three-piece government has powers over the other ones. No one is so powerful that they can run the entire country. All three must work together to ensure that everything is working as it should. All the laws are being made in a fair way that's representative of the people of the country. The next slide, power of the purse. Power of the purse just is a way of talking about Congress's power to authorize taxation of citizens, the spending of money, and the printing of currency. Congress, or the legislative branch, are made up by senators and representatives, which are voted on by citizens. So the people who the citizens vote for are the ones who have the power to authorize taxation, money spending, and printing currency. So that's one power that the legislative branch has that judicial and executive do not. Okay. Number 15. Who makes federal laws? So we just talked about that. The people who write up the bills that become laws are the legislative branch. So you can say Congress, the Senate and the House, which makes up Congress, or the legislator, the legislative branch of government. Any of those answers will work. They're the ones who come together and put together the laws that we'll follow. What are the two parts of the U.S. Congress? This is number 16. The answer, the Senate and the House of Representatives. Okay. Number 17. How many U.S. senators are there? 100. There are 100 U.S. senators. The reason why there's 100 U.S. senators is because each each state in the United States has 2 senators. So if each state has 2 senators, and there's 50 states, that means we have 100 U.S. senators. Number 18. Who does a U.S. senator represent? The answer, all the people in the state. Notice that it says all the people, all people. U.S. senators don't just represent citizens. They represent everybody who's currently living in their state. So even if someone who's not a U.S. citizen has a concern or an opinion that they'd like to voice to their senator, they have the right to do that. They can call their office, they can write a letter, they can go online. There's several avenues that they can take to reach out to their U.S. senator to try to express what's important to them. But everybody who lives in the state has the right to do that. It's very important. Number 19. We elect U.S. senators for how many years? The answer? 6 years. 6 years. We'll talk about an easy way to remember this later on when we discuss representatives and the president and how long their terms are. Number 20. Who is one of your state's U.S. senators right now? Currently, in Texas, the U.S. senators are John Cornyn and Ted Cruz. This is subject to change. We've got an election coming up soon. So one of these senators may be changing soon. If you do not live in Texas, your senators are going to be different. So before you go take your test, regardless whether you live in Texas or another state, before you take your test, you need to make sure that you check who is your current U.S. senators that represent your state. Number 21. The House of Representatives has how many voting members? 435. 435. Now, why is it 435? Well, that's just the number that they stopped adding new U.S. representatives. Originally, the states would earn more representatives when their population increased. But at a certain point, when they hit 435, they decided that they had enough representatives. So today, instead of adding new representatives, they just increase or decrease the number based on the state's changing population. Every state is entitled to at least one representative. There are several states that have low populations and they only have one representative. Currently, the state with the highest number of representatives is California. They have 53 representatives. But for this question, it's very important that you just study that 435 number. There's no tricks, there's no way of solving that. You just have to know the number. Number 22. We elect a U.S. representative for how many years? The answer? 2 years. 2 years. So U.S. representatives are up for election every 2 years. Now we're going to discuss a little way to remember the 2-year and 6-year terms of representatives and senators. Representative is a very long word, a big word, which is funny because they have the shortest term, 2 years. Senator is a short word, and it has the longest term, 6 years. So that's just a little thing to try to keep in your head as you study. Representative, big word, short term, 2 years. Senator, short word, long term, 6 years. Number 23. Name your U.S. representative. Currently, in the Texas Panhandle, our representative is MAC Thornberry. It's very possible that this will change soon. U.S. senators U.S. representatives represent districts within the state. So depending on where you live in your state, your representative is going to be different. It's very important before you take your test that you look up your U.S. representative for your specific area within your state. Number 24. What is the name of the Speaker of the House of Representatives currently? The current Speaker of the House is Nancy Pelosi. Nancy Pelosi. It's very important that you make sure that this is current whenever you go take your test. Currently, it's Nancy Pelosi. However, if she doesn't get reelected as a U.S. representative, that could change. Number 25. Why do some states have more representatives than others? We discussed this previously. Because some states have more people because of the state's population. Anything to do with the state's population, how many people that the state has, anything like that should be acceptable. What you need to know is that every state has 2 senators, but every state has a different number of representatives based on their population. So for this question, the important thing to remember is it's based on the state's population. Thank you for joining us. That was part 3. Join us next time for part 4 when we cover civics questions 26 to 36. See you next time.